Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe thunderstorms in the central plains, mainly for Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And we're also in the beginning of the video going to be talking about some snow in the northern Rockies, as well as for some parts of the Dakotas and eastern Montana as well. So not just in the higher elevations, but also in some of those flatter areas east of the Rockies. We're going to be recapping all the snow that's already happened and then talking about what snow could occur within the next few hours. So let's get right into it, and let's start off with your current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have a few flood watches up in central Texas as well as southeastern Oklahoma. We have high wind watches and warnings, as well as some wind advisories in parts of the southwest. We have some freeze warnings in effect for some parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, Idaho, a little bit of Oregon as well. We have some red flag warnings up for parts of northern California. And then we have a few frost advisories also up for California. We have some winter weather advisories in that purple color, which you see scattered throughout parts of Colorado, also for a little bit of Utah, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas as well. And then we have some winter storm warnings in that pink color for some parts of Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Montana. We have some hard freeze warnings in that deeper purple color for a little bit of New Mexico and Utah, as well as I believe a little bit of Wyoming as well. And other than that, we don't have many other watches or warnings. It's actually fairly quiet once you get east into the eastern half of the country. But out west, we do have a lot going on in the form of snow, rain, and severe weather. So most of the action is in the western half of the country as of right now. If we look at yesterday's extremes, we had a high temperature of 99 in Rio Grande Village, Texas. The highest, or the low temperature, was in Polbridge, Montana, where they got down to 15 degrees. Highest rainfall report was in Lecompton, Kansas, where they got 4.96 inches of rain. And then we had 2 snowfall reports of 12 inches, both in Montana. And these are only the snowfall reports that came in on October 11th. So we had a bunch of snowfall reports that came in this morning, but I did not include that on today's extremes because, of course, we only look at what happened yesterday. So these are only snowfall reports that happened on the 11th, and these were the highest of all of those. If you were to count what we saw today, you would be looking at some snowfall reports up near 25 to 30 inches in parts of Montana and Wyoming that we saw get reported. So in tomorrow's video, you'll see those pop up on the bottom right here. But because we only cover what happened yesterday, when we look at the continental extremes, you won't see that being posted in today's video. So you'll have to wait until tomorrow to see those numbers get released. Taking a look at the current amount of snowfall that we've seen so far, we have seen quite a bit. That yellow color is 6+ inches. In the orange, or kind of this color right here, that's 8 to 12 inches, 12 to 18 inches in the deeper orange color, and then you're looking at 18 to 24 or even up to 30 inches in that red color, which you see for a little bit of Wyoming and Montana. So we had that one big band of heavy snowfall, which was for central Idaho, southern Montana, and also into northern Wyoming, but we still haven't seen all of the snowfall yet. If you live in western South Dakota, western North Dakota, into eastern Wyoming, eastern Montana, basically from Billings on eastward, you still have not seen the full amount of that snowfall. A little bit further to the south, we saw some decent amounts up through southern Idaho, as well as into the higher elevations north and east of Salt Lake City. Also into southern Utah, we saw quite a bit, especially in those desert areas. And then northern Nevada, you were looking at barely a trace to as much as 6 inches in some of those higher spots in the Ruby Mountains. So we did see overall quite a bit of snowfall. It was pretty pretty close to what we expected out of this event. Some of that snow in Colorado still is not completely over with as of right now. So we still are going to see some of those reports filter in. If we look at the 1 to 3 day winter storm severity index, you can see that we actually have an extreme purple color for northeastern Wyoming and eastern Montana as well. So that's where you could be dealing with quite a bit of snow. And for this entire area, pretty much that's in that yellow color, you want to be taking some action and at least some precaution when it comes to this winter weather. If you look at over the next about 20 to 25 hours, we're looking at another 6+ inches in that purple color expected to drop in eastern Wyoming, eastern Montana, and even into western South Dakota, especially in the Black Hills, where we have some of those amounts getting up near 15 or more inches of snow. But even into the flatter areas, we're still dealing with closer to 6 to 10 inches of snow, and that even extends into western North Dakota, which is, again, fairly flat. We're not dealing with a huge elevation difference within these spots. The Rockies are all the way back here, so most of this snow is happening east of that high elevation. So it goes to show you, if you get a well-developed enough system, you don't really need to have elevation to see snow, even though it is still mid-October. So that's something interesting. Over the next day or so, the next 24 hours, we're going to have quite a bit of snow dropping over some parts of the Midwest. If we look at why that's happening, here's the low temperatures over that same time frame, and you can see that we're dealing with lows getting into the 30s for a good portion of western Nebraska, western South Dakota, western North Dakota, eastern Montana, and eastern Wyoming. And then you get back further to the west of there, and you're even into the 20s, even maybe some teens a little bit higher up. But when we're looking at the area that could see snow, it's going to be right here. It's a little bit too warm as you get further to the east, but it's right in that perfect temperature zone as you get west of this line, pretty much. Or actually, that line would be a little bit further to the west. So basically, if you live west of this area right here, you are in that prime temperature zone to see a little bit of wet snow, especially. I don't think this is going to be really that fluffy of snow, especially into the Dakotas and this area in general, because it will be 33, 34, 35 degrees when it is snowing. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to shovel, and that might cause some issues. But hopefully it's not going to be too much snowfall to the point where it causes any big issues or delays. Let's start talking about the severe weather in the Central Plains, which is going to be associated with this system. You can see that we have a slight risk up for much of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, with an enhanced risk for much of western Kansas, western Oklahoma, and some of the panhandle of Texas. And then we have a small moderate risk, which they added just a few minutes ago, in southwestern Kansas, northwestern Oklahoma, and the northeastern panhandle of Texas. So this area is going to be our bullseye zone roughly, but even if you're in that slight risk, anywhere within this slight risk zone up all the way to the moderate risk, you do want to pay attention for the possibility of these severe storms. Less so in the marginal risk. That's where it's not as likely, but you still might see a little bit of thunder and lightning. If you look at the individual risks, here's the tornado outlook. You can see that we have a 15% risk of tornadoes within this area. Now, that's 15% risk of any one given point within a 25-mile radius. So, for example, if your town is right here, then you would have a 25-mile radius, which would be right around that size, that there's a 15% chance that within that radius you would see a tornado. So, if we're looking at this, you're saying that there's a 15% risk that this area sees a tornado, there's a 15% risk that this area sees a tornado, and you can see how that kind of adds up to the point where there's a fairly good chance that we see at least one or two tornadoes, maybe even more within this time frame. So this is not saying that the entire storm system has a 15% risk to see a tornado. It means that within a 25-mile radius of any one given point within this red zone, there is a 15% risk of tornadic activity, which when you add that up, it actually means that we're probably going to see one or two or three or even four different eastern tornadoes that could be rather strong. That's why we have that significant hatched region over that entire area as well. That indicates that we could have the possibility of EF2 plus tornadoes within this spot right here. And even if you're just in that brown 5% risk of tornadoes, you still do have that potential, and you want to pay attention to the Storm Prediction Center and any alerts that you do get. If you get a tornado warning, what that means is that there's an imminent tornado within your area that's been seen by a storm spotter, or that is very likely on the ground based on radar data. So once you get that tornado warning, that means that pretty much you have just a few minutes to get into the safest spot of your house, whether that be an interior location, or if you're lucky, if you have a basement, go down there. If you're in a mobile home, try and get to as sturdy of a location as you can get. So if you're out on the go, and let's say you're in the middle of a store, just stay there, because that's actually a pretty safe spot to be in, because you have, of course, all the walls and stuff around you. So just try and be in as interior of a location as possible during that tornado warning, which could kind of prevent any damage from happening to you if you were to get into the path of that tornado. If we look at the hail outlook, you can see that we have a 30% risk of hail, and again, this same thing applies within 25 miles, within a 25-mile radius. So there's a 30% risk of hail within this area, a 30% here, a 30%, a 30%, a 30%. So within that entire area, you have 25-mile radiuses where you have that 30% chance of seeing hail. So when you add that up, again, that is a fairly good likelihood that at least somewhere within the zone we'll be dealing with some decent hail. And if we look at the wind outlook, we're looking at a 30% chance of wind damage. And again, that same 25-mile radius rule applies to this as well. Let's take a look at what the HRRR model is showing, which stands for the High Resolution Rapid Refresh Model. And this is one of the most high resolution models that you'll find. It's really good for within 48 hours, but it does not go out past 2 days. So you can only really use this in these type of events where it's happening on that afternoon, or maybe it's happening early the next day, because you can only go out so far with this model. But it is a really good model, and it does have a lot of detail to it. So for example, you can see that snow still going on in Wyoming and Montana, and then you can also see that severe weather in high detail over the Central Plains. So we're going to play this out for you guys. Here to be around 10 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Mountain Time tonight. And you can see that we have quite a bit of severe weather action across western Nebraska and western Kansas. If they were to issue a tornado watch, which I think is quite likely, it's probably going to come around 5 or 6 p.m. Mountain Time, or that would be around 6 or 7 o'clock Central Time today, because that would be a couple hours before the event actually takes place. So moving this on to very early tomorrow morning, so we're talking about 1 or 2 a.m., and we're dealing with that line of storms now in the middle of Nebraska and Kansas, and also exiting the panhandle of Oklahoma. This system is very, very large and strong. So we have that low pressure right over here. So your low pressure is located right here. You have, of course, all that snow, which is located to the west of the system. So you have all that snow over here. But in that warm sector of the storm, so again, you have your low pressure right here, and inside of your warm sector, which is right here, you're going to have some of the severe weather. Your cold front right now is back here. So within this zone, which you have in between the warm sector and the cold front, which is further to the west, right in here, you're going to be able to get severe weather, and that's going to be your prime zone for severe weather to develop. So this is what can happen. You don't really need a lot of ingredients ahead of the system to really get severe weather in this type of scenario, because you already have all that energy that this system is creating. So you don't need anything really underlying. You really don't need that good of the high temperatures. You really don't need a lot of that, which you would typically need in your average pop-up afternoon thunderstorm. And we're going to show you some of the parameters in just a few moments, and you're going to see it's nothing really too impressive when you look at things like energy or dew points, but it's the fact that the system is so strong that's going to allow that to really thrive. So we see that rain going into eastern Kansas, western Missouri, much of Iowa by this point, dealing with at least some moderate rain All of that is going to push away further to the east. For those of you who live in the western Dakotas or eastern Montana or even eastern Wyoming, you can also see the snow occurring at that same time. So this would be by about 10 a.m. Central Time, which is around 9 a.m. Mountain Time, and you can see that we have some of that heavy snowfall into western North Dakota, western South Dakota, eastern Montana by that time. So I don't want to forget about you guys out in the northern plains, because I know you guys are going to be dealing with quite a bit of snow, even though it's not going to get the same attention as if that same system were to be somewhere in the east, which is unfortunate, but I still want to kind of cover that as if it's the same exact area. A lot of YouTubers are not going to cover this system as deeply as other storms because it's not affecting as many people. The western United States only accounts for about a quarter or a third of the population of the entire country. So, of course, when you have one system there, it's going to be less profitable for those YouTubers than to make a video on somewhere in the Northeast or the Great Lakes. But I still want to cover those areas equally because, of course, people still live there, so you still want to cover it and give them the same information that you would give anybody east of the Mississippi, and so I still want to cover those types of systems. They're actually quite interesting to track because they're completely different than how they operate in the east compared to the west. So it's always fun, for me at least, to track these systems, and I hope you guys are enjoying that as well. Let's take a look at a few of these parameters. Again, the amount of energy with this, the Cape, really not that impressive. We're dealing with maybe 1,000 to 2,000 as you get further to the south. But when you're looking at things up in Nebraska and northern Kansas, really you're not seeing a whole lot in terms of the Cape. So you're kind of scratching your head by this point, wondering why did we see those thunderstorms pop up if we have basically no energy available. Our temperatures are high enough to see severe weather. We're looking at about 65 to 75 depending on where you live within the Central Plains, but these aren't remarkably warm. They're really not into the 80s until you get south of the Oklahoma border. So we're not really dealing with anything too drastic in terms of the temperatures. And the dew points as well only get that 60-degree line only gets as far north as central Kansas. So you're still kind of scratching your head at why you had those storms up in Nebraska. And one of the reasons is simply going to be because of the severity of that trough. When you look at that, we had a really big trough into the western United States. I'll actually go back here, and you can see that we had this big area of really dry air that's to the west of the system. So this big divide between drier and colder air combined with the warmer and more humid air as you get into the eastern half of the country, that combination is what's going to spark the severe weather. We also have a big upper level jet which is moving throughout the southwest. That's why you have those wind advisories in place, but it's also what's going to be driving some of that wind shear, and the amount of wind shear that we have today is actually quite high. So that's going to allow for more tornadic and hail activity than would typically be available or possible into those spots. So that's one of the reasons. I think that upper level jet is probably the biggest reason why that's happening. You have the upper level winds which are moving pretty much straight over this area, and when you have that, typically severe weather is going to set up, especially if you have even a decent amount of humid air down there. If we look at the maximum wind gusts over the next 30 hours, and this is going through tomorrow early afternoon, you can see that we have some wind gusts that are going to be getting up to about 30 to about 40 miles per hour for a good majority of areas. But as you get into some of these kind of red colors, that's where you're looking at more 50 to even 65 mile per hour winds. Of course, higher elevations in the Rockies, you're going to be up there in the amount of winds. The winds in the east really will not be that high, so we're dealing with winds maybe gusting, you can't even call that a gust, but maybe 10 to 20 miles per hour. Same in the west, we're looking at a little bit higher winds. We're looking at about 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts, but again, nothing that's going to be too crazy over those areas. It's going to be really the central United States with all of that wind, severe weather, and also snowfall. So This has been a really interesting storm to cover so far. I'm thinking this is probably going to be the last video I make on it. I'm pretty sure I've been covering it for at least 6 or 7 videos now. And again, a lot of people are not going to cover this simply because it's not going to give them as many views, because there's not as many people who live in that part of the country as compared to a different part of the country, so the eastern United States or along the west coast. But I still want to cover these areas again because I know I have quite a few viewers who are actually from the Intermountain West, so they always need their weather coverage. And then also I have quite a few up from the Dakotas and Montana as well, so I want to cover that area as well, just to kind of give them a little brief. I have a few viewers down in Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma as well, so I'm pretty much covering all of those viewers in today's video. I'm thinking that any snowstorm that we get that really has an impact like this one, no matter whether that's in the west or the east, I'm probably going to cover that, as long as it's not a simply a higher elevation snowfall. So if we get maybe just high elevation snowfall in the Rockies and nowhere else, not even any lower lying spots, then I'm probably not going to make a video on that. But if we were to get a snowfall storm for an area like Salt Lake City, or for Boise, or for Cheyenne, Wyoming, or Denver, Colorado, or Missoula, anywhere like that, I'm probably going to make a video on that as well. And then of course anything that happens east of the Rockies, I'll have some snowfall coverage on that, and I'll probably have quite a few snowfall maps once we get those storms to get up and running. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. It's supposed to start cooling down a little bit as we get past the 20th, so I'm excited for that, and that means that we'll have more opportunities for our first big or sizable snowfall in the eastern United States, not too far away. So I hope you guys did enjoy today's video, and if you did, please consider leaving a like on the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.